Good evening. My name is Irineu Gianesi. I'm Dean of Academic Affairs at INSPER, and it's a pleasure and honor to welcome all of you here for the opening of the Euro Week. This edition in 2018 is the third time that we host this event, the European Union Week at INSPER. And this year we have the opportunity to discuss more in-depth issues around innovation and technology, not only in Brazil but also what's happening in Europe, and ways to foster and deeper the collaboration between Brazil and the European Union. So I'd like to thank you all for coming for today's session, and invite you also for tomorrow's session that will be further described in a moment. I'd like to invite Jan Kirschbaum. This event was brought to INSPER by the European Union, and specifically this year by the Consulate General of Luxembourg and Portugal. So I'd like to invite Jan Kirschbaum, the Consulate General of Luxembourg, to say a few words about the perspective of the European Union on this event. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. On behalf of the European consuls in São Paulo, I'd like to welcome you warmly, everyone, to this 2018 version of the European Week, which is becoming already a tradition at INSPER, the European and the city of São Paulo. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the faculty, staff, and students of INSPER in the name of Marcos Lisboa, thank the always excellent working partnership with Irineu Gianesi, Ana Carolina Oliveira, and welcome also to this event Monica Pianes, and all the dedication and support of Andressa Freitas de Mello, who made this event happening. One cannot stress enough in times we live the necessary and of the strengthening of already strong existing relationship between the EU and Brazil, the sustaining pillar and same values we share in the DNA of the European Union, the respect for human dignity, human rights, freedom of speech, freedom to come and to go, the respect for others' faith of religion or non-religion, the respect of sexual orientation, the acceptance and respect of different opinions and value, the democracy, the equality, and the rule of law. These values are the structure for all of us to mold our future. As someone mentioned, the future is no longer what it used to be. To look and prepare for tomorrow, it's what we propose this year at our European Week at INSPER. In our today's and tomorrow's discussions and debates, we will prepare and must prepare for the changes, and very rapid changes, such as how do we absorb content, distinguishing the right and the fake content, prioritize of what we need and how, what we need and how, and what we want to learn in modern times. The impact of technology in living in a world and moment by having a global data bank where we have immediate knowledge available at our hands. We have to distinguish what is data and what is information and prioritize that. How do we secure privacy? How do we cope and prepare with climate change and energy scarcity? How will health professionals be and how will we be treated? What is being done in Europe, in Brazil, and other countries and regions? how are we all preparing for the future? How can, and most specific, European institutions integrate, collaborate, and co-work together with Brazil? All of us here this evening will have an honor to hear, interact, and debate with top and world-class professionals present today, which will enrich our lives. To introduce Enrich and the speakers of today's panels who will enrich us, I would like to pass the word in a minute to Monica, our moderator, and also take the opportunity to thank Dean Carolina, whose mission is to look and prepare others for the future. Please participate, debate, ask questions. For those who do not want to speak in public, please write your questions. For those who would like to make questions and participation in Portuguese, please feel free to do so. At the end of our seminar, you will have an opportunity to interact with the panelists at our cocktail. Finally, please look at the social medias, the 2018 European Week in São Paulo, with debates, concert, exhibitions, which will go until May 15th. Thanks, and I wish all a great event.
Good evening. Welcome to INSPER again. And, well, I will be moderating this section. And for that, I will introduce each one of our speakers. The speaker, the one who will present, who will have a small presentation, short presentation, comes from Enrich. Enrich is the new center, is the European Network of Research and Innovation Centers and Hub. And Brazil is one of the pilot projects of this group, of this initiative. We intend to enhance cooperation in research, technology, and entrepreneurship between Europe and Brazil. For that, we will have Dr. Marcus Will, who is the head of the Fraunhofer project of esse Brazil, and the Institute for Production Systems and Design Technology, who will be here presenting, giving us an idea, an overview of what is the intent, what are the advances, what are the initiatives that are being carried out and will be proposed by Enrich. So please, I would like to welcome Dr. Marcus Will. Please. And for debating this presentation, talking about technology, talking about innovation and education and how to advance the debate and how to promote and foster growth and development, I will call a panel that is composed initially for Carolina da Costa, the Vice President, INSPER's Vice President, who is also a professor and a PhD in education by Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and who has been ahead and in front of, yes, please, and ahead of the undergraduate program and in administration, economics, and engineering at INSPER, has also been responsible for the Center of the Advancement in Teaching and Learning, and which is in charge of management, assurance of learning, and with the impacts of design of program and curricular development and management. So, thank you. Next, I would like to invite Professor Newton Frateschi, who is the Executive Director of the Innova Unicamp. He was the Director of the Gleb Watagin Physics Institute in the University of Campinas, the Unicamp, Brazil, from 2014 to 2017. The Deputy Director of this, and he was also the Director of the Center for Semiconductor Components and Nanotechnologies. And now he is in charge. He's still a professor in the company and head of the Innova Center, who has been technology transfer officer and promotes the transfer of technology for established companies and resources to help launching startups. Innova has already filed for 1,042 patents and granted 87 licenses. So it has a great experience in the technology field. Then I would like to call Professor Aline Angelica Acosta. Aline? Hi. She's a biologist from University of Paraná, north of Paraná, who has been developing research in parasitology and biology with the Biology Center, also with the Czech Academy of Science in Czech Budojosevic. Is that okay? I don't know. Okay, in the Czech Republic, and has experience in systematics, taxonomy, phylogeny, and ecology, and research in general in the biology field. Then I would like to invite Mr. Fabio, please. Fabio is a lawyer, a doctor of law, and also has a master in civil law, and he's representing the Institute of Butantan, who is a well-known center for the development of health, public health, and health in general, and advanced research in São Paulo. So he has been director for many years the legal counsel of the Technological Research Institute, IPT, in São Paulo, and his fields of activities include areas of law, technology, innovation, and intellectual creations. So, with that, thank you for this panel, and I would like to ask that to give the word, to pass the word to Mr. Marcus Will, so that he will present Enrich, and then we will open to debate.
Thank you very much, Monica. Can I use this microphone? Great, thank you. And thank you very much for the invitation to this great event. I would like to thank specifically Mr. Jan Eichbaum, who was organizing this from the European side, and I would like to thank the INSPIR Directorate here for making this possible. I think it's a very interesting and important event. And actually it has a lot to do with what we are trying to do at Enrich. It has been said a couple of times now, what is Enrich? This is the question that I would like to answer in 15 minutes here, quickly. Because it's about innovation and how we can bring the people from Brazil and the people from Europe who are working in some way on innovation together. That's the main mission of Enrich, you could say. What is innovation? Nowadays it's a word that is used a lot, as you know, and of course also we are discussing this inside our group, our consortium a lot. What should we concentrate on? Well, to be frank and give you my point of view of what I think we should focus on when talking about innovation is exactly what we are doing at the Fraunhofer Institute. This is where I'm coming from, and my colleague Johanna, who is here with us today, who is also working for Fraunhofer IPK in Berlin, in Germany. The two of us are coordinating this project, Enrich, but our background actually is innovation in the core, you could say, because I don't know if you know Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer is the largest organization in applied research in Europe. It's a network of 70 different institutes, a network of 70 institutes working on various different topics of technology, and our main mission is to produce something new that is of direct benefit for the industry mainly, let's say the economy, also society, but really focusing on the industry. So I think that is what we always have to focus on when talking about innovation, not only seeing the research side, of course, this is an important part, the new stuff, and the new developments come from the research side, from the universities, from any kind of research institute, but we're really trying to have the whole panorama of the innovation ecosystem, as we like to call it sometimes, that is really going until the market. That is also including players like entrepreneurs, it has been said, startups, but also small, medium-sized, and even large companies who want to introduce new technologies in their company and on the market. So that is something that Fraunhofer has been working on for the last 70 years, you could say. And this is, of course, something that we bring in here and also into this project Enrich that I will present now, where we are trying to, well, do exactly that, bring new technologies to the market, and doing this now in collaboration between Brazilian researchers, entrepreneurs, innovation players, and European researchers, institutes, technology providers, all of the players inside this innovation ecosystem. If we could start the presentation, please, I could give you a short overview of what we have designed so far in Enrich. Do I have to press something here? First you need to launch the presentation. There it is, great. So, as I said, Enrich is a project right now. Actually, the project name is Sebrabik, but you can forget that name because the European Commission decided on the way when launching this project, we changed this name now to Enrich. And you have already heard what Enrich stands for. It's the European Network of the Research and Innovation Centers and Hubs. It's also a very long name. I think the main keyword inside that long name is hub. And also to not create any misunderstanding, we are not building up a new research center that will do its own research. That's not what we're going to do. We will be a hub that will bring together the people who are doing research, who are doing innovation technological developments and bringing to the market. The Enrich in Brazil project is one of 3 pilot projects that are running in parallel now that are financed by the European Commission. There was a call 2 years ago from the European Commission that was actually asked for, and this might be interesting for our European guests here, asked for by the member states inside Europe. They were asking the Commission, hey, we need to do something on, well, helping Europe to connect itself and all the member states of Europe to connect itself to the rest of the world in terms of research and innovation and entrepreneurship. So this pilot project was created, and there's 3 countries where the European Commission wants to connect and wants to build up these kinds of centers, these kinds of hubs. Brazil is the one pilot country. The other 2 are China and the United States. We have started, as you can see here, last year in January. Our first year we dedicated to really designing a sound strategy on how to go to the market. And this year, our second project year, we're concentrating on piloting some first services, really going to market, trying to really get in touch with the users on both sides of the Atlantic to already test where's the demand, what kind of services really bring the benefit that we want to bring. And at the end of the day, or actually at the end of our project after 4 years that are financed by the European Commission, our big goal and target is to build up a center that works on an autonomous basis and also finances itself autonomously. That's our great challenge. We have 4 years in total, now about 2.5 years to go to reach this objective. And of course, the main objective behind all this is to encourage the cooperation, as I already mentioned, between Europe and Brazil on research, innovation, and business, the whole innovation chain. Right now, it's a project, as I said, and behind this project there are 12 organizations from Europe and Brazil. You can see them here on the map. There are 4 partners from Brazil, where we already tried to have a diversification so we can bring all the different knowledge and expertise from the partners inside. That is, from universities. For example, we have Unicamp as one of the partners in our consortium here. We have other universities and research centers on the European side. We have CNE, who is a very important partner for us here in Brazil also, the voice of the industry, you know, the confederation of the industry here in Brazil, with their operational arm Senai that we are working on, working together with very intensely. We have Confab as the umbrella organization of all the funding, the state funding agencies, the so-called FABs, as you probably know. And we have AMPE here, which is the Association of the Innovating Companies and the Innovation Players in Brazil, also important partners. So already here, you see we get together a lot of expertise and different backgrounds. That's very important, and we do that on in the same logic on the European side, bringing together private companies, research institutions, also a funding agency, FFG from Austria, for example, and others, an association on science parks down there in Spain, for example. Now, with these partners, we have discussed last year what really should be our goals, our mission, and also what is our vision that we want to reach by the end of this project. So when the project ends in the end of 2020, and then going, of course, into 2021, we want to be the main hub and contact point to bring the players together on science, technology, and innovation. How are we going to do that? Well, by encouraging and facilitating the cooperation between those players in research, technology, and entrepreneurship on both sides, and really having this whole innovation chain, as I mentioned already, in mind here, be it public players or be it private players, and actually bringing those two sides together is a big deal of the whole initiative here. Well, and this brings us to some certain general objectives that you can see here. And one important part in our first discussions last year was Enrich in Brazil has to be a two-way initiative. That is, it's not only bringing researchers and entrepreneurs and other people from Europe to Brazil, but of course doing the same thing in the other direction. So Enrich will also be the contact point for the Brazilian partners, for the Brazilian players in the innovation field, to come to us and say, hey, I want to launch a business over there in Europe, or I'm a researcher, I want to do a project with some specific partners over there in a specific European country. Can you help me? Yes, we can. That is our value proposition, to help exactly in this kind of demand from the both sides. So that's why we're building up, on the one hand, a certain service portfolio right now, and testing some of these services already right now on the market here. Services for both sides, both services that will serve the Brazilian users and that will serve the European users. In parallel, we are now working on building up a certain structure, because, as I said, it should not be only this project that we're having right now, funded by the European Commission, but really a autonomous structure that is an association that we are going to found this year, and we will really have a known legal entity here in Brazil. So that is the let's say legal structure and organizational structure, and of course we're also talking about physical structures that we want to build up. The whole idea of Enrich is to have a network approach, bringing several partners together inside this project right now, but then also inside a more constant structure with certain locations. Right now we're having our headquarters in Brasilia, but we are talking right now to several initiatives that are there to also open up, for example, a branch here in São Paulo, and also in other parts of Brazil, of course, to have a good outreach to our potential users that we are trying to reach here. Well, and this has to do with the community also that we will build around that, let's say, core structure that we're building up right now. So the whole idea, as I said, is this networking approach, to have a community of, on the one hand, users from Europe and Brazil, as I mentioned, but also from service providers who are also already doing things as we are planning to do here. So we also do not want to invent the wheel a second time, and we also do not want to do any kind of competition against anybody who is already playing in that field, as we know. So we are all trying to integrate them inside our community with a certain concept that I will show later. Our service portfolio, to go through these three pillars quickly now, is constructed on the basis of these 5 or actually 6 pillars that you can see here. The idea is to structure something like a user journey. Because we were last year discussing with our Brazilian and European partners, how do we start this kind of initiative here? How do we attract also the interest and the demand from the users that we want to give benefits to? Well, imagine a researcher or an entrepreneur on either side here of the Atlantic who wants to go either to Europe or to Brazil, first thing he needs to have is some information. It sounds trivial, but we found out that this is in many cases already the first barrier, the first hurdle, you could say, that there's not at least one portal or one platform where you can get all the information in a consolidated way. And so that is something that we want to create here. Get informed, where you will have a platform with very well-structured information on basic things like where do I get started? What do I need to know about if I want to open up a business as a Brazilian, for example, going to Europe? Now, what are the countries? What's going on in general? And then, of course, some more deeper information, guidelines, step by step. How do I start any kind of a business or a project over there in the other country? Also, research about markets and other types of studies will be available to get some first and profound information on the market where I want to go to. Then, if I have the information, I want to get connected. I want to find the right people. It's all about matchmaking. It's about really then bringing the people together. Bringing the people together on a focused basis. So, again, imagine this researcher who wants to do a certain research project in a certain area. He needs to know not in general what is over there going on in the research landscape. Well, good to know too, but he wants then very concrete context. Who are the players in, let's say, nanotechnology or in digitalization of industry? Who are the right partners to talk to? So we will have several services, including events and delegation tours, to really set up these personal contacts. Then, if I find my partners, next thing is I want to get funded or financed in general. That is on the research side. Where do we have funds for research projects? There's, for example, the Horizon 2020 program from the European Commission, which can be a good starting point. Then we can talk about the match funding on the Brazilian side. But not only that, that's more on the research side. Also, I'm a business, now I want to find an investor in that target market where I want to go. So what are the right investor contacts, and how do I relate to these investors? How do I do a pitching, for example? If I'm an entrepreneur, a startup, created a new business, and I want to convince, let's say, some investor because I want to now open an office in France over there. So how does that work? Who are the investors over there in France? Who do I talk to? How do I talk to them so I can convince them? So we already are talking about trainings here, not only on how to write a good research proposal together, for example, but also on how to pitch my business idea for an investor. Then, if we have all that set up, then I really want to get going. I want to go over there and get started quickly. Then we are talking about what we call soft landing structures. That is, for example, workspaces or any kind of infrastructure that will be provided for these people who want to go over there, and also other kinds of training, really then practical trainings on how to get started over there in the other market. And the last pillar here, when I have set up my basic business structures, let's say, I want to now get visible as a business. That is about marketing, that is about business development, support, and any kind of consulting. Here we will then also be very customized. If a business has a certain demand, then of course we will also provide that via our partners. It will not only be the Enrich office who's only doing that, talking about that network and community. We will then of course also bring the specialists together with those who have the respective demand. And a final thing is also legal advice that will go in parallel through all these stages. As you can imagine, this is also, of course, a very important aspect if I want to go over there. It's about IP issues, IP policies, and other things like patent advice and any kind of legal support that I need to start my business over there on the other side of the Atlantic. Here's just some examples of those services, of concrete services that we are piloting this year. As mentioned, this is just a selection here of some of these events and trainings that we are having. For example, end of this month, there will be the AMPEI conference in Gramado, down there in Rio Grande do Sul, as you might know. And inside that conference, we will, on the one hand, showcase to the Brazilian audience in that case, what are the opportunities, what is the research landscape over there in Europe, and we will already do first matchmaking events on that conference, and a first training also on how to write proposals, for example. This is then a second step, as you can see in the second box. So general information showcase on a conference. Next step, specific training on how to write successful proposals for Horizon 2020 and a certain stream there. Then other specific trainings. Then we have webinars, for example, on what are the research and innovation strategies. And this will be 2 webinars, one for the Brazilian audience to get to know the R&D strategies over there in Europe, and then will be a webinar for the European audience to get some first ideas about what's going on in terms of research and innovation in Brazil. Next step will then be who wants to deepen that fact-finding mission or a roadshow where the people can also then meet in person, discuss the issues that they have. Then there will be boot camps, which are more intense trainings for people who really want to get started. And then to get really started, we are launching a first innovation tour, matchmaking innovation tour this year, where we intend to bring a first group of Europeans in that case to Brazil to do a tour around Brazil to get to know some interesting places like technology parks and other players here in the Brazilian innovation system. And by that we are trying already to foster some first contacts here, of course, and to already bring some first results. Right now our structure is relatively lean, as you can see in here. We have inaugurated our headquarters in Brasilia. You can see that down there last November. We are located there at the premises of CNE. And a couple of weeks ago in Brussels, there was the first focal point inaugurated, not only for Enrich in Brazil, actually. This focal point then also integrates the other 2 projects, as I mentioned. So there in Brussels, you can also go if you want to do business with China or the United States, or with Brazil in our case. So first focal points are installed, really also physical places, and now we're expanding that structure, of course, and planning, as it says there, to also launch and found this legal entity, this non-profit association in Brazil. Talking about the third pillar, the community. Well, of course, in the middle you can see our headquarters that are that have been inaugurated. We are planning branches, for example, in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. But not only that, we are planning also what we call soft landing hubs. And the idea is to really have a very good distribution of various, centers that will then act on behalf of Enrich, where the people can go to and find, for example, the workplaces they need, some infrastructure, and also, of course, help and coaching to get started. But then also connected to a physical place where they can go and set up their business in a first step. We're talking about Enrich ambassadors. This is also an important part of our concept, and again, maybe an important information for the Europeans among us here. As I mentioned, we don't want to invent the wheel a second time, so we are conscious that there are already a lot of initiatives on the member state level, that is on the different European countries. They are over here, they have consulates here, they not only have consulates, they even have already, in some cases, specific entities that are working on that field of innovation, like, for example, the German Science and Innovation House. Marcio Weichert is here, the head of this house. So we are in contact with these initiatives that are going on, and of course we want to integrate them. I was talking here about the member states, but of course they are even on the European Commission level. A lot of initiatives, and we have discussed that just today with Jan Eichbaum and his colleagues here, where we really want to, integrate what's there already financed by the European Commission, where in a lot of cases the people and the projects don't know each other. So this is the first step, bringing the people together. That's what we call the Enrich ambassadors, to really get all these partners on board here. And then on the other level, we have, of course, the service providers, who are any type of organization who can fulfill what I showed here on the slide before of our service portfolio. For example, legal advice. Of course, we will not have our we won't have lawyers of ourselves, right, for each and every aspect in the Brazilian legal system. There we would need a lot of people, and this is not efficient. So we will have, of course, associates, service providers associated to Enrich, who will then provide that service. For example, lawyers, offices who are specialized on this kind of international business. And of course, the maybe most important part are the individuals and the organizations who will be the users, and also, in the sense, the clients of Enrich, making use of the services that we bring. Well, I have talked a lot already. To make it very short and to give a good idea, I would like to show a video about Brazil. Can we start that? I don't know. Okay. This video is 2 minutes and then I'm done.
Brazil is not just home of Brazil is not just home of coffee, carnival, and Christ the Redeemer. It's one of the world's most biodiverse and socio-culturally diverse countries, as well as a world-leading example of what can be achieved in renewable energy. It's the 5th biggest country in the world, the 7th biggest economy, and a leader in the biofuel industry, and a world-class player in nanotechnology. The European Union is one of Brazil's main trading partners, and is already benefiting from this innovation and from cooperation in research, technology, and entrepreneurship. But many Europeans don't know where to start. Meanwhile, in Brazil, organizations are asking similar questions. Enrich is the European network of research and innovation centers and hubs. Enrich in Brazil was set up to answer these questions and more, and to enhance cooperation in research, technology, and entrepreneurship between Europe and Brazil, through events and activities that allow organizations to connect, share, and learn via the extensive Enrich network, specialized advice and support to help European academic, industrial, and commercial organizations engage in research, innovation, and business in Brazil, customized market analysis and legal advice, strategic planning and business model development, access to funding opportunities, training on various topics such as technology transfer, communication or fund acquisition, workspace, and secondment opportunities. Our mission at Enrich is to connect these 2 great regions and to ensure a good flow of communication and cooperation between European and Brazilian research and business organizations. Find out how you can get involved. Visit our website.
That's it. Enrich in a nutshell. And I would like to leave you with that last slide here. If you want to get in touch with Enrich, you have various ways, as it had been said in the video, all the social media channels you find here. And of course, take advantage of our piloting year this year. This year, all the services will be free of charge. This will be not the whole time in the future like this. As I mentioned, we will have to finance ourselves. Stay tuned, become part of our community, and hopefully we can do a lot of interesting things in terms of innovation together. Thank you very much.
Well, now and then we are going to pass, and because actually for all this happen, and actually for Enrich to work and this community to get together, all the stakeholders that you mentioned, we have what are the obstacles, what are the predicaments, what are the things that are going on in Brazil, and what are the advances that we have. So one of the main, crucial fields that we have to consider is education and how technology is being passed on, how it has been taught and researched, and then learn to learn, right? So I'll pass the word to Carolina da Costa, our vice president, so that it comments on what is at stake and what it takes to get to a society, to a community of scientists or actors that actually can provide and can take part in this, and what schools are doing and what we are doing.
So thank you. I think it starts with the question, what are the needs of the job market and the individuals that comprise the industries and the sectors? And this is the question that INSPIR has asked. The reason we launched an engineering program together with business and economics, understanding that is the the integration among those areas that generate opportunities for innovation. So we were a few months ago with a discussion with companies in the area of Industry 4.0, German companies through a cooperation that we have with VDI. And we are discussing what are the professionals of the future and how education and technology can foster those goals of educating those professionals. And I think I don't want it to be common sense. Everybody will think about technology in the sense of providing online education or labs or MOOCs. I would like to go a little bit further and think about the role of universities in general and fulfilling the needs of the job market and how technology can support those goals. And what is pretty clear to us is that in terms of developing individuals and professionals, we have to get out of the common sense that is just a matter of general competencies. There's a need for specialization, which is something that is not too much of a fashion few years ago, a decade ago, and now it becomes something important for universities to take care of and education to take into account. How do we specialize individuals in different paths of the learning journey so we provide effective professionals to all fields of the job market? So we have to look that universities will be places for them to be in and out. So it's not just a matter of come and have an undergrad or a graduate degree and that's all. So we have to be open for this continuous learning and the learning to learn, which is part of our learning goals in our programs. So we have to really assemble a platform for learning that takes into account that professionals, individuals who will come in and out very often to universities and to places in which they can have a continuous learning. And so thinking about how technology can help, technology can provide ways for us, and not just the formal education. So I was looking at Europe, for example, initiatives as we have in Switzerland, in Germany, and in UK, which are centers for training and higher education that provides opportunities for formal and non-formal education so that we take care of the whole challenge of the job market. Not everybody will have an undergrad degree. And we have to think about ways that you're going to provide other forms of education that makes people productive and competitive in their sectors. So that will make us pose, in my view, 4 questions that leads to discussion about the role of technology and innovation in the education sector. The first question, considering that you have to build platforms for education within and outside the university that provides continuous learning, in understanding that individuals will go in and out to seek for continuous update of their education. The first question and the consequence of thinking about technology is how people will learn. And so you're presenting the Enrich, and that is pretty much focused on user experience. Universities are not focused on user experience. And we have a lot to learn to provide a platform that is user-centered in the sense that we have to fulfill the needs of students and our partners, institution and job market, in ways that we really can provide services in a more user-centered way. So we are not at all, not just INSPIR, but in general, we have a lot to learn to be a user-friendly journey in terms of providing education. And that it becomes even more desirable from the side of individuals because we have to be flexible enough to build new learning paths. And that leads to the second question, who teaches? Those are, in my opinion, questions to think about disruption and innovation in education. So the first question, how to learn? And we have to build user-friendly journey tracks so that we can really focus on the needs of individuals and partners. Second question, in that sense, who teaches? Not only professors. We have executives, we have technical executives, we have all sort of professionals that have to be in the ecosystem of the education platform to help us form and develop those professionals. In that sense, we have to open up the environment for new types of professors. Of course, that we're not going to we're not going to get rid of the more traditional kind of academic professors. They're definitely important in terms of fostering research, but you have to have other types of professionals, coaches, mentors, techie guys, techie people who can provide a means for that. Third question, what is certifiable? Definitely, we're not going to just focus on undergrad and MBAs or more formal degree formats. There are opportunities for other types of formats in Europe is pretty much in the advancement of this discussion, providing consortiums of universities in which professionals stays 1 week and goes to another week to another country, and we have a lot to learn with those types of models that also get Latin America involved. So we have to think about new formats and new units of certification, units of what is certifiable, so we can provide new modes for learning experiences. And the fourth question that is a little bit more threatening to us is who certifies? Not only universities will certify. The more the job market starts to provide, for example, thinking about the computing sector and the need for programmers and other types of skills that we have to provide very fast, supply the market with those skills. Sometimes the length that takes for them to get educated in universities won't fulfill the needs of the market. So we have new institutes or new ways to form those individuals or to give those types of skills, and you have to be open to this type of opportunities. So I think these four questions actually drive the discussion on education and innovation with the support of technology when you're talking about education as a sector.
That's a great, actually a great start also to then follow up on the discussion of what is Richie is doing. But then I would like to ask Professor Frateschi to give a little bit of his experience and talk a little bit what has been the challenge of being a head of an innovation center, Innova agency, and how actually some of this has been some of what Carol has mentioned has been or not has been in the agenda, in the platform, and how you have dealt with the innovation and the new demands of the market.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, the most important question I think you have to ask is, what are the missions? And what is the mission of universities such as the university I come from, like UNICAMP, and how we can transform a given knowledge into a product or a technology in the market? How is the process, how this process happens? And I think there's a lot of misconception in that respect. And this being, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems that we have, at least in Brazil. So I'm really glad now we are expanding this, and I'm sure most of the problems we have are similar in the world in terms of how to do this transferring of technology between universities and the world outside university, and sharing the experience now with the Enrich program is going to be a great thing in this respect. So what is this misconception? is to expect that university will do the research development for a given product or for a given service. The university, as we think of it, is not the place where this should happen. This should happen at industry, outside the university. So what is the mission of the university? It's actually to provide, to have out of the university the best human resources you can think of. And these people are the ones that should be the leaders and the innovators, and they should do the innovation outside and in the place where the innovation is done, particularly in the case of technology-based industry. And the question is, when we do this, the people doing research and development in industry comes from the university, then the connection between them is much more straightforward. What happens most of the time, now talking about Brazil, one of the challenges, as I was asked to talk about, is that the person from the company, the research and development part of the company is not here, is in its headquarters. So when the person that will be talked to us is not somebody that came from the university. When this starts happening, then you start creating an ecosystem. In the first level, that's what happens. People go outside and they innovate outside. Once they do the innovation, you produce now the small ecosystem. Now the thing is, the question we have to ask now is how you can prepare people, human resources that can do the right innovation, that can be the leaders. I'm really concerned now with the new advances and the way how fast things go in terms of technology, that by the time we start forming somebody in whichever course you may think of, by the time you finish, the world has changed already. So it has to be somebody that is already adapted for this dynamical way that the job market will be. And in that sense, we believe seriously that the way we can do it is to have the students in university in a close contact with this universal knowledge and close contact to cutting-edge research. When you put people together with cutting-edge research, the most challenging questions you have in all areas, from the most basic humanities to basic physics to the most applied research, these people are being prepared to be the innovators outside the university. And more than this, the way we think is that the research itself is not an end, is a mean. The end is to have these people. Now, the thing is, if you're working with people and you're working with cutting-edge research, naturally, you end up almost like a byproduct producing new technologies. I mean, even though you don't have to force every single person in the university to be doing applied research or trying to solve the problems from industry, you may, inside the university, already produce technology that can be then made available to the outside world. Then that's where you need an agency like ours. We need to transform some of the technology by prospection of the labs, the papers, the things that we have, and transform that into a particular invention disclosure, transform that into a patent or something that adds value to the university. But that's not enough. So we need an agency also to look at these patents and look for the transferring technology by talking to whom? To these people that actually are in the industry doing research and development. Since they are from the university, we can have a very good communication with them. And what we see happening now is that that's the second level for the ecosystem. The third thing is that naturally, because of this new way of looking at the job market, a lot of our students, they already come with this entrepreneur way of thinking about how they're going to do in life. They may not want to, like before, people would like to work for a given company for the next 30 years after they finish the graduate, and now this has changed completely. So we need to have in an agency like ours ways of transforming these new students as in entrepreneurs. And then you have to have like incubators and places for these people to actually even talk to the technology that we already have available. And quickly, we start seeing now new students, new technology, companies, and the ecosystems being built around this way. And so the agency, the challenge is this, identifying where we can help with education in terms of doing entrepreneurial education for the students. And not only this, it's not only a question of academics, because we have people doing academics on that. We need to take those people and make new companies within the university. So that's why, in our case, we have an incubator. And finally, a place where all this ecosystem works together is like a scientific and technological park, in which you have professors, researchers, students, big companies, small companies, incubated companies, startups, and you name them, they're all together. And together in the sense of being together, playing ping pong or something like this. You know, like I've learned quickly that by being together, the innovation happens exactly in these areas. And I'm very convinced that the innovation comes at the interfaces between knowledge. So you really have to be outside your comfort area. And you have to be always at this interface. And the only place you can have this is when you have different partners in the same place, physically in the same place. So as a result of this work, I think the Unicamp has started at 50, it's going to be 52 years old this year. And it's already created with the DNA of interacting with the outside world and have this entrepreneurial type of attitude towards its mission. And I think it's really centered in producing leaders for the market. And the innovation agency has already now 15 years old. And one thing that is good that we see about this is that we already have about 1,100 patents, and we have actually licensed to 13% of this. So, and in terms of inducing new research and development, which is the agency has to participate in terms of prospecting new technologies, is we have give more than 64 million reais of investments in research and development there. Just to finish, just 15 seconds. And looking at the final history of these 51 years, today, our alumni companies, we have 485 companies providing 30,000 jobs and annual income of about, product of about $1 billion, 3 billion reais, which is about 1.5 times the budget of the university. So I said the ecosystem is starting now being built based on this idea that I try to explain the main mission of a university like ours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. What is very interesting, you're talking about the ecosystem and bioma, kind of technology innovation driven by ecosystem, and you talked how to get there, right? What kind of school you need, what kind of teachers you need, what kind of people, and if you need certifications, if you need what and who certifies us. And this is part of this ecosystem. So to some extent, you are very complementary. It's like you are at the one end and one is the beginning of the process, and you are more in a kind of complementing this process, kind of a value chain or a chain of in the research and innovation. But then we have, I would like to hear a little bit from Aline, what you as a researcher and who has been developing very much in the front of the innovation in terms of biology and parasitology. What are the difficulties and what are the problems that you see vis-a-vis this word, this ideal, and these questions that have been put here in terms of like, well, what do we have, and do we this environment, these ecosystems, and these conditions? How have you faced them, and how have you dealt with them? Is that how could you give us your insights? Yes.
Well, thanks very much for the invitation. Thanks to Pavla who invited me, the consul from Czech Republic. And I can see that I'm the youngest here and the less experienced, but I'll try to project my experience to you, especially to the students. So I did my master and PhD in Brazil at Unesp in Botucatu, and I could see a big change from when I entered the master and when I finished my PhD. So I enrolled the master in 2011, and it was like the glory years for research in Brazil because we had the money, we had resources, we had investment. But as we all know, we faced some crises in all segments of Brazil, so I could see the decline of research in Brazil during these 6 years being grad school. But nevertheless, we worked hard, most of the students, with what we had, and most of us could succeed in spirit, and I see some people succeeding. So for my PhD, I had the opportunity to go to Czech Republic to do this, what we call sandwich doctorate. And during this time, I was able to learn some new techniques to apply in my country. And even though I do basic research, as we saw in the video, Brazil is the hotspot for biodiversity, and I work with a biodiversity survey of parasites of freshwater fish in the Neotropical region. And even though it's basic research, we still can see like a lot of the basic research applied research. So in Czech Republic, I had the chance to learn molecular techniques to apply to systematic and taxonomy of organisms in Brazil. And from that perspective, from the basic science perspective, we can apply to like aquaculture systems, fish production. So these molecular techniques can be applied to identify pathogens in aquaculture system. But I can see that it's like an idea that we had in my study group some years ago. We had this idea to like excel our research to the world, to the applied sciences, to companies, to industries. But due to our lack of investment, due to this crisis we had, I could see that there has been like a decline in this, but we are still working. And I can say that I think any student in my field can have a successful experience in Brazil, because that's where we have the organisms to be studied. And speaking for UNESCO, I believe the same applies to Unicamp. We have like an infrastructure to develop research. Like the university in São Paulo state are like the best in the country. So we have a structure, we have skilled students, we have expertise. But right now the problem is to have like investment and money to run, like the laboratories to run our researches. And if we cannot surpass this basic moment of our lives, that's taking the master and PhD, it will be hard to think of the next step that would be applying our knowledge to technology, to industry, and like they said, think outside the box. So we have difficulties. In our case, like for the public universities and research, it is the decline of investment, but we still have means to succeed. And I can say that we had difficulties. I had difficulties during the PhD with this declining investment, but somehow I succeeded, and I hope like students can take this opportunity right now that INSPIR is offering in Reach to have this exchange between students. That was very important for me. So I think, and also this experience has opened doors for me, because this week I will be returning to Czech Republic, and the same supervisor that I did my sandwich internship has invited me to work with him as a postdoc student. So this is great. I mean, I think Brazilian government gave me the opportunity in the time that they had the chance, and I took this chance, and I could apply the knowledge that I learned abroad in Brazil, because I think that's the main goal when you have this internship between students. And it's a pleasure for me to return now and see that I could combine my experiences there in Brazil, and I can take the knowledge from Brazil to Europe. Okay.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. It's interesting that you present some of the main problems in promoting, developing an environment to create innovation or to promote innovation and technology. That is basically resources, human resources and financial resources, right? And incentives, and how you go for there too, right? And then it's like, is it based? And the other questions that you pose is like, what is it basic research that we do, or is it advanced research, and how advanced this research is, and how can it impact and distribute? But for that, we need the professors that you mentioned, the people that and the recognition, right? And also the environment that Professor Fratesk mentioned, like this ecosystem, to keep going and actually to keep fomenting and incentivizing the situation. But then, before we open up for debate and other questions, I would like to pass the word to Fabio, who is actually a lawyer, and he knows the environment and the way, well, he has a knowledge of the institutional and legal barriers, and also also the how advanced research and well, in technology in representing here the Instituto Butantan.
Is it on? Good evening. As you can see, I'm not the youngest, so and I'm here on behalf of Professor Dimas. He sends his apologies for not being able to come. And well, to start talking about the challenges that we face regarding innovation here in Brazil, from a legal perspective, I don't know how many of you are aware that in Brazil it takes at least 10 years for you to have a patent granted. So you get an idea of how difficult it is to deal with this kind of matter here in Brazil. But on the other side, Brazil is also very rich. The contact of Brazil with patent laws, and to some extent, is very rich. People don't discuss that very much. Brazil was actually the 4th country in the world, before even becoming an actual country. When it was still a colony, it was the 4th country in the world to have somewhat of a patent law. And this rich history is not being developed well here in Brazil, because the legal barriers come from the bureaucracy. Many things that could be different are not being done. There is not much investment. I believe the president of INPI, which is our patent office here in Brazil, is doing a terrific job, a fantastic one nowadays with the limited resources he has. But at the same time, I believe that there is a need for more. And I want to address what Professor Newton and Professor Carol have already said. We have this need for the best human resources, but I want to add to some extent to that. There is a need for a more intercultural relationship between the expertises. I believe that a lawyer like myself has the obligation to understand an engineer. When Nalini talks about parasites, I have to have, to some extent, the capacity to understand what she's telling me. And I think that 2 words sum this need of what we can do for a better system in general. The first one is a collaboration. Collaboration first and foremost. Because we have this the patent system is very, very connected to the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution has this competition thing going on since always. And it's always a thing of getting there first, ahead of the competition. This world is about to change. I firmly believe so. We are going into a collaboration world, and because there is no real innovation without collaboration. And to have this collaboration, and this is the second point, I believe we need a more diversified specialization is important, of course, but we need to have our students having contact with more and different, not only technologies, but different areas of expertise. We have to have lawyers going to biology laboratories. We have to have the engineers come talk to people from economy areas. So this integration, this relationship is really what is necessary for us to overcome not only Brazilian difficulties in general, but also for people to better understand that the patent system is difficult because people really don't really understand each other. I believe that's I have addressed here.
No, thank you very much. I think it's very interesting because now you brought like basically collaboration, integration is basically what this table, this panel is doing, right? And it's like trying to put together all these ideas. And to some extent, Enrich is trying to actually, when you made your presentation, say like, well, let's bring together all the stakeholders and in different cultural settings, being it China, Brazil, Europe, and then maybe US. And I think that's very important. And then you brought another thing that is multidisciplinarity. Yeah. And multidisciplinarity is like, what are the new, the new approach, and actually university has been, you also brought that, actually INSPIR is one of the proposals and approach of INSPIR is to promote and to provide education or approach that is very interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, and to some extent to bring this together, right? Law, economics, technology, and communication, and so on. So, but then that's well said. But how do you do that? How do you really get there, right? And you were thinking about innovation technology, and can us agencies and institutions in Brazil, with all the difficulties that we have, even difficult sometimes to bring these institutions together. That maybe Enrich will be the one who is bringing these institutions together. And with the lack of resources, that now, for example, we have less of a state provider, apparently. How do you come up with a solution for that? How do you integrate more? How do you make this integration effective? And to the extent that we are actually collaborating with each other, and how we change the institutions, and are you really at the front of the research, or you are merely catching up? So these are some of the issues that I think emerge here, is like, and how do we deal with it? So I would like to hear a little bit of you, and then I'll open to the audience.
Very quickly, first of all, one thing that's interesting in Brazil is if you look at the INPI, which is our patent office, 2016, you look at the first 10 institutions that actually deposit a patent. 9 of them are public universities. And then the 10th position is a company. You look at the United States Patent Office, for a similar search, you'll see that the first university appears in the 69th position, or 71st, or something like this. Okay, there is a problem with the culture about doing patents. Also, there's this problem that it was well remember the fact that it takes too long for you to have a patent. But also, if you don't want a patent in Brazil, it's because perhaps you don't want to do business in Brazil, because you don't even need to worry about protecting it. But I think what I was thinking is that there is a need to improve this culture, and through this ecosystem, people start realizing that only through patent, and only with that system they could have a better patent, you would be able to finally leverage the development of the country. In terms of money, at least in the state of São Paulo, in terms of money for research, I think we have FAPESP, which is amazingly, even with all these, the crisis, yeah. FAPESP, if we talk about Brazil, it's different, but FAPESP, and actually our GNP of the state of São Paulo is 1.8 trillion. If you look at 5% of that, it's like 30 billion reais that could be invested in research. So, I mean, there is, right? And I look for the program, the equivalent of the SBIR, the PIPE, it's a program for innovation in the small business. As there's more money than a demand for projects in this program from FAPESP, and this is known. So I think we have resources coming from the government, at least in the state of São Paulo. So we need to build and force more this ecosystem in terms of working together. We have a network here of 39 37 technology transfer units in the state of São Paulo, actually Butantan, the Campo USP, and we try to work together to do a capacitation all together for all of us to help mainly in this area of transferring technology.
I'd like to add, I don't know if you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
There's a widely spread chart that I like to mention that the main barrier to innovate, and your question was how to innovate, and I'd like to build on your thought. It's not the physical system, it's the social system. So this chart is a very interesting one. You have in one X, you have time, in the other one, pace and rate of change. And you see that changes in technology, it's a very, very aggressive curve, while human adaptability is a very linear and more stable line. And the question for us who wants to innovate in social systems is how to create social systems that helps institutions to be more adaptable and individuals. And I'd like to mention the case of Embrapi. I don't know how many of you is familiar with Embrapi. And I think the opportunities for innovation is in social engineering social systems that allow for intermediate. For example, like in Rich, you're trying to do something that builds on network. Embrapi is not all systems will be successful. So the case with Embrapi is that they understood there were needs in the industry for research, and there was resources available in universities for doing research, but none of them were able to talk to each other. So there's always the issue of communication and translation. You have to have a very good translation system. So Embrapi, with the help of government, so government makes a donation to Embrapi, and that money becomes private. And Embrapi becomes the intermediate between industry and universities, allowing for this type of research to really have an impact in industry. And each of the parts puts 1/3 of investment. So you say, what is the big deal? And the big deal is very hard to find, is how to make the right intermediation and how to find the right incentives in the university setting for this to work. So this intermediate, which is Embrapi, actually makes as an auditing process to make sure the universities are making a very good use of research from the point of view of the companies. So what is interesting is that if we're able to engender this type of intermediation in a very effective way, I think innovation may arise. So it's not every kind of intermediation. So one of the agenda that I think would be worthwhile discussing is these mechanisms for right. It's not just a matter of, oh, look, I have an institute and I'm willing to foster research. I have to understand the incentive system of that ecosystem and really the needs of why we have research in university, but they're not very applied. And then you look at the career for professors, you see that the career for them to get promoted is not a very good incentive to make applied research, which is something that we changed, by the way, at INSPIR. And you look at the companies, they have money to put in research, so why do sometimes they're reluctant? It's because they don't believe their research coming from university will be useful. So it's interesting the case of Innova, because you ended up building a very, very interesting and effective social system that gives incentives to all parts. And it's very tricky to find these right ways to boost social systems so that you have the incentives aligned for universities, companies, and job market, in the sense of individuals being employed, to actually work together for innovation to happen. So it's not trivial. So that really, I think there's an agenda for research that studies this intermediate process and who works which one works and which ones doesn't work very well. And something that we all very interested in learning.
Yes, I was just about to. Sorry, I was just about to comment on this. The Brazilian system for fostering and financing the basic research is it is a very successful model because we have great basic science here in Brazil. This model has been brought up by scholars mainly, and the human being is as a creature of habits. So the habit has come from the academy, and the grants go mainly to other scholars. It's not a sin. It's not something that is wrong. It's something that was built as a system that has proved to be very successful. But now, in this system, it talks to some extent to the patent system itself. Because you, as a basics researcher, what do you get more funding for? You get more funding for publishing papers, putting your research out there in the world. And by the time you finish writing, you publish your paper, you get the grades, you get more funding. In the Brazilian system, I'm going to talk about Brazil. If you publish something that was, I'll try to be very, forgive me for being somewhat in a very simple way, trying to talk in a very simple way. If I go there and I publish my result, and it was, it could be something that was patentable, you simply lose it. There is not much in between. And this is a problem with the system because you drive researchers away because of the bureaucracy, because of the difficulty, and how hard it is for them to understand that the patent system is not a monster. But it drives them away from what they have been accustomed to. And so my suggestion, and it has been for some time, we have to break the barrier between the basic science and applied science, because they are not really that different. The system that treats them is different. Applied science and basic science, they have a lot to learn, and we have to have a balance of these two. But we can only achieve that here in Brazil if we foster a little bit more of more researchers to get contact with technology and applied sciences.
Just to say a few words following your line. It's like I said, we have habits, we have a mindset in basic research that once I finish my publication, I need to go to the next. I don't have time to think, oh, I published this. This could be applied to a certain field, a certain area. I cannot do that. I have to think on the next publication because we need numbers, right? We need numbers of publications and numbers, not only number, but high quality publication. And that's what I thought, like for 7 years, just publish, like publish or perish, as we say in grad school. So like I said, I don't have the time to think on how to apply this because my professor will ask me to work on the next publication to get more funding, to publish more. And becomes like a snowball, that never ends. And also, I talked before about some negative aspects of research, but as a professor said about FAPESP, it is a positive aspect of doing research in São Paulo State. FAPESP has a good money to invest in the students and to apply to the universities. I had a grant from FAPESP for my PhD, and it was great because the money was more than what CAPES and CNPq pays to the students, so I had to worry less about having money to live and saving money. And also, each student from FAPESP who has either undergrad student or master or doctorate, each student has money to do this internship abroad. So each FAPESP student have the opportunity to take an internship abroad. you know, because FAPESP, once you get a grant from FAPESP, FAPESP saves the money to the student to go abroad. If the student doesn't go, okay, but the money is there. And I think that was amazing because, and it's a less bureaucratic system to apply and to get the grant, and that worked very well for me. So FAPESP also has like initiative with the private companies, like a professor was saying. So even if you're not at a public university, you still can like write proposals, just go on the FAPESP website. They always post all their projects going on, and they have like a collaboration with international institutions like Fulbright or some other private initiatives. So I encourage students and professors, go to FAPESP and search for these opportunities, because it is usually it is a good money, and they encourage basic science, applied science, and how to use basic science to applied science. So I really recommend to the private initiatives to look for this. Thank you.
This is why we need to work together, because the researcher, he doesn't have to, he shouldn't be worrying about the outcome of his research. That's why we have this need of working together. I have to understand the reach of her research, so I can say, oh, maybe this one you could set up for us to try and patent this one, and working together.
Marcus,
Well,
please.
what we are hearing here in this very interesting discussion is actually, if you want to summarize it, in two things. We have to open up the two worlds that usually do not have too much contact with each other, and I think in Brazil even more, but we still also do have that problem in Europe, but maybe in Brazil even more. That is, the industry has its own logic, mindset, culture, or whatever you want to call it, and on the other hand you have the science. Of course there are some links, and we are all here trying to work on that, but in general it's pretty separate, right? As we have heard, because even the incentives in the science system, for example, do not even stimulate you to go to industry or to think about the application of your work. So, and there you can do a lot of things. We heard some things that you can do on the research side to open up the system there, to have the lifelong learning approach, to send people abroad, and there Enrich can help in this first step, in a doctorate or something, to send people in the student exchange abroad and open up the mindset in this way. But on the other side, the industry side, is also some work to be done. And maybe the biggest difference between the innovation system in Brazil and the innovation system, for example, in Germany, where I know the numbers, I guess in Europe in general, but I know the German numbers better, is that the majority of research and development in Germany is funded by the companies, I think around more than 60%. And in Brazil, it's completely the opposite. Most of the research is funded by public funds. So there we see the challenge. On the industry side, Embrapi, and I had exactly the same thing in mind, I wanted to say the same thing, is one nice try of a good stimulus in that direction, to make the industry also think about innovation. But you know what? Maybe to get this innovation culture that I always talk with my clients also about here in Brazil, how do we get this innovation culture inside the industries? I think the easiest way is to stop talking about innovation. Because and even research, even worse for the businessman. Research, come on, what is that? And patent, 10 years. I'm sorry, I get all your arguments, but 10 years to wait for a patent. Come on, then I'm broke. I mean, it's not. You cannot talk to a businessman about it. So why not talk to him about little incremental changes, little improvements he can do in his company? I just take the example of Industry 4.0, another one of those big keywords that we heard after innovation today a lot. What are we trying to do? For example, there in Fraunhofer with small and medium-sized enterprises, even there in Germany, they have a certain reluctance. This curve that you were quoting here is even inside the heads of some entrepreneurs. They say, wow, disruptive change in Industry 4.0, I don't think this is something for me, that's too big. And then all the societal challenges about it, this will change our work force and so on, and all the things that make the people, well, reluctant to change, because their habits and so on. We have discussed that. So let's not talk about disruptive change, disruptive innovation. Let's talk about, and that's how we're going. We come with a suitcase to the small enterprise and say, hey, can we just check your machine over there and put a sensor there, and we show you how you can have a nice digital representation of your shop floor there, and then get the thing going. And then he sees what actually is the benefit. This is what we have to communicate to the industry. What is the benefit of innovation? It's either to make more money, because you help them to make better, new, or whatever products, or to save money, that is, increasing productivity, to increase efficiency by improving processes. For example, by introducing some digital things in the machinery and so on, which is Industry 4.0. So we show them on a very low level. Don't even talk about research. Don't even talk about innovation. So here's your improvement, and by that you get them to innovate because he sees the benefit. And this is maybe the other part that's still missing. Also.
Yeah, you are introducing now another things. There is necessarily you're not going to catch up in big leaps, but actually incrementally we can maybe contribute more and have more of impact than thinking so big that we cannot actually encompass it and comprehend it.
Small steps.
Yeah, small steps, and that's very interesting. But actually, even to have all these things together, it's important to think of what is the next one, and are you doing basic or more applied and more advanced research? What is exactly where you are, and well, can we do it? Is it a challenge that Brazil can really defeat? And it's not just the Scientific Republic of São Paulo, FAPESP, and the top institutions like we're here. We have actually to have spillover effects to the whole country and to the other companies, and to have a synergy with other companies. And I think that's one of the small things, and how you bring it to the end or to the point, to the street level to some extent, right? But I would like to open to the audience for questions, and then yes, please. Could you state your name and where you come from?
Yes, my name is Robert Wong. I was born in China, educated in American schools, and raised in Brazil, so tricultural. But thank you very much for the presentation. I was very privileged to hear to be before brilliant minds and eloquent presentations. But I must say that I'm very frustrated, and I'll tell you why. Because I came here to try to hear about this, how do you call it, enrich. And I just heard a lot about the means, education, technology, innovation, funding, patents, whatever. But there wasn't one single word, or at least I must have missed it. What is the end result? What is the end that you're achieving? It's like people ask, what's the end of war? It's not conquest, destruction. Now, these are means, or bombs, or whatever. The end of war is peace. I'd like to really hear, just very briefly, because I have to leave for a dinner, and my friend Jan held me back here because he said, no, you have to ask this question. So what is the real end result of all this stuff? What we as lay people, the human being, the layperson, what can you expect from Enrich or whatever these initiatives that you are talking about? Thank you.
I think I'll give the word to yes, Enrich, and then.
Well, Enrich will not save the world. And Enrich is just a little player in this whole game of innovation that we're discussing here tonight, as I take it. Enrich should be the hub to bring the people together, and not to even start innovation or anything, but to bring the people together on an international basis. You had the privilege to live that, as I take it, as I understood your background. What we were talking about here, and there I found your question interesting, is innovation, and yes, and I was trying to make that a little bit clear also with my last intervention. Innovation is not a means in itself. That is, I think, a very important point you're tackling there. We should not stop there, thinking there to say we do innovation because we like innovation. Because that is exactly what I was mentioning, what the businessman also does not understand. What is that for? So, but your question is big. I mean, we could have now a new discussion around about this. I think, well, either you stop at the point that where we're talking about industrial development, then that is not the means, but the objective of what we're discussing, innovation, or even societal development, then it goes further. And yes, we should have the two always in focus. I think that's a very valid intervention. I don't know what the other panelists are thinking about it.
I know that these big words and the Global Innovation Index, Brazil is in the 69th position. And what is the meaning of this, and if this is important or not? And I think it is when you think that the first place, if I'm not wrong, is Singapore. So what I expect the end of this is that we can add value to whatever we produce here, not just being a forever producer of commodities. And I think the role of the university in the open innovation system is fundamental. And now when I say this, and I say that at least in our case, we have now 485 companies that started because of the existence of Unicamp, generated 30,000 jobs, and generated yearly 1.5 times the budget of the university. I think this is a great result. So we want this expanded and having this this connection between university and the world outside the university more efficient in order to achieve to go a little higher in this ladder. And the way I see, just to finish here, I don't believe there's any problem about basic research. Basic research, as I said, research is, in my opinion, is only a way, a mean of making what we want, which is human resources outside the university able to do that, to create this ecosystem that will generate a situation for the society that is better for everyone.
Just to add, I talked a lot about, I started my presentation, quick presentation, talking about fulfilling needs and the importance of social systems to get more adaptable. I could talk definitely about values, such as for us, universities and research centers to be in service of human needs and company needs. But I'll take in a more technical terms, I think in general, we are striving to have better causal models of success. What actually makes certain sectors more productive or more effective or more prone to be adaptable to the new complexities of the market? I think those are interesting questions to answer. And they all passes through social systems that are more adaptable. And that is a whole discussion. What is to be more adaptable? First of all, is to really take care of other human beings. I could talk about the important values of empathy and to be conscious of your context. But it's also, if you take this to the strategic side of your company, is to be tuned to the needs of your customers, not to impose your business model, but to make sure that it's really in the service of attending needs. And that's the question that all of us should make in the companies and institutions we are responsible for. That's the question I make as responsible for INSPER. Am I really fulfilling the needs of my students? Am I really fulfilling the needs of the job market? I cannot be so enthusiastic about my value proposition to the sense that I forget to make those questions. And that really leads me to governance systems that are really open to make those questions. And we have to get rid of this kind of more centered way of seeing the world and look at from the eyes of the users, as I emphasized in my speech. So I think it's a very important question that makes all think that innovation is really a mean that make us more actually effective in serving those needs and make our purposes more meaningful and relevant to make us be worthwhile living as institutions. So I think I would add that. Absolutely.
Please, another question.
Is it on? I can hear you. Okay. First, thank you very much for the presentation. And thank you for giving the time to listen to my question. My name is Bruno. I'm a student from here. And I always had a very a lot of interest in research and development. I always thought that maybe my future in career as an engineer could be in research and development, and you see a lot in the education system here that it is not the case usually for engineer students to focus on research and development in Brazil. When I say that I want to stay in my country and yet focus on research and development, I get weird looks. I get the reaction that you should go abroad. You should try to get in a company and see how you can jump ship to Germany or Switzerland or Japan if you want robotics. What is at fault here? And two main questions. What am I missing in terms of my obligations if, as a Brazilian generation who's getting trained and educated in technology, to jump ship? Is it part of the problem? This, let's say, brain exodus that it's happening in Brazil, and I think that it's happening now mainly because of the crisis. And what could be work for my generation to prevent that to keep happening? What are possible solutions? Because I hear a lot of innovation, I hear a lot about entrepreneurship, but I only see that the more you get trained and the better you get your skills, the bigger the chance that you leave and not stay to contribute for a better country.
Thank you for your question. Given the advance of the hour, I would like to give you the sir here in the front the word for the question, and then address both questions.
Thank you. Congratulations to each one of you for your presentations. It has also made me reflect. I have an innovation hub, and I also have an ecosystem platform. So, I come from the venture capital and private equity world. So I see each one of you an element and a piece in a process. And when I add that process together, you are still in the valley of death, as they say in the Silicon Valley. So what are you contributing through each one of your observations? You are contributing, in my mind, to mitigating the risk of that ideation that is taken to market and beyond. I'm not sure if I made myself clear. Because with each one of your contributions, bringing together integration, collaboration, co-working, et cetera, in a new world of technology, you are bringing each other closer to each other, and that way you are mitigating the risk, because in the valley of death, as they call it in Silicon Valley, 70% or more of the startups die. That's all I had to say. I was trying to address Mr. Wong, but he left.
I'll start with Bruno's, and I think your comment really adds to the point. If I understood you correctly, Bruno, you were asking, is there any other chance to stay in Brazil and be successful without having to go outside? That's your question? What your generation can add to the agenda of making Brazil more attractive? I think there are two parts to your question. I think the world today, everybody knows, is global, and I think expertise is everywhere. And you have to take advantage of that. For example, it's good to learn from Silicon Valley, Valley of Death, so that you get less romantic about being an entrepreneur, which is something that our generation wants very much. But we know that in order to be a successful entrepreneur, MIT just launched a study, very interesting study, that shows that the 20 years old entrepreneur is a lie. The successful entrepreneur has an average of 42 years old and a very good expertise in the sector that he actually launched its ventures. So, in a sense, we mitigate a little bit of this romanticism about sectors and fields, bringing good research that shows what is the reality and what are the difficulties and how you can actually prepare your generation to be more successful or more critical when it starts any endeavor. So I don't see any problem in individuals going after expertise everywhere in the world, and internationalization is part of our agenda, so that you're going to have your exchange program or your MBA or your master or your PhD outside, and that's okay, even though we have to strive to make our graduate programs even better in Brazil. The question that worries me more is that I don't want it to come back and bring this expertise to Brazil that needs a lot of people like you working for our country. And that goes through the question of what is your our economic and social system, and how that actually gives incentives for people to innovate in companies, make research, and launch new endeavors. And that's what we actually hoping for our students when they become leaders in the policy agenda and institutions that intermediate the debate, that really bring a good research and a good debate agenda for the country to create conditions for your generation to help. So I count on you to make our environment more friendly for people to innovate, to build ventures, for companies to innovate and create, new projects, so that we develop our country. And education is definitely, that's the mission of INSPIR. Education is definitely a means for that, because we wanted to keep this platform alive and relevant, so that people come in and out in a ways that gets specialization in interdisciplinary education, so that they can contribute to the environment, and that generates a virtual cycle that benefits Brazil. And I was 8 years outside of the country, and I came back to work in education, so I'm a good example of that. It is possible.
I just don't want to spoil. Oh, very, very quick. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of research, very, very good research done in your area. And this research I think there's a big job in terms of helping professors. And this is our job, to show them that sometimes you don't need to wait. We can file the patent and you still can do your thesis defense. It's just a thing about knowing how to do it. And this is our job in terms of an agency of teaching this. But there's a lot of opportunities. And now, like you, I have 2 students, PhD students, that did their FAPESP thing and then the sandwich program. And one of them is now working at Intel. Another one in a startup just went like last week in Silicon Valley. They are part of this ecosystem already. Even myself, I went to get my PhD outside, and I'm back in Brazil. So I see the ecosystem already happening because of this collaboration. So there's going to be opportunity, and I think it's global. I totally agree. This is much more global. And as I said, I mean, naturally, you just try to be close to the cutting edge knowledge. This is, I think, my advice, because if you're doing this, you have the cutting edge research, if it's applied, pure, whatever you can call it. But in that sense, you either be entrepreneur, you'll be somewhere in the ecosystem, okay? Now, in terms of mitigating the risks, I think that's what we're doing, definitely. And we're trying to understand, and this is our main goal, right? Trying to help the industry or the entrepreneurs to not fall in the fall of death. And that's the best way we can do it at this point. And I think we succeed, but I think the 70% number is probably even higher here, but it's true.
Fabio.
Yeah, I would like to add to what Professor Newton has said. It was perfect. Stay in contact with cutting-edge technology, because nowadays there is no reason for you not to know what's going about in the rest of the world. But what I myself would like to address both of you is, for your generation, take more risks. Take much more risks than the previous generation has taken. There is a huge space for venture capital here in Brazil, and because there is a culture in which risk is something that people don't like. People like to play it safe, and it's more of a reality here in Brazil. And so the industry here in Brazil, some part of it is starting to pay attention to that. But take more risks, because it's already going to get you one step ahead of everyone else. Because most people are taking a look at what's already working. And maybe that's not the answer for everything.
Well, given the advanced hour, I think we are closing, but I would like Marcus to, if you have a final remark, and if anyone would, please.
Okay. I'm still thinking about these two interesting questions here. Actually, I think you did good, because the Brazilians should first answer the question of the young student here. But maybe just to add from my perspective, now being in Brazil for 6 years, but coming from outside, and even in that direction, this exchange is always enriching. To always come back to that wordplay, Jan. For me personally, really, because it brings you a new perspective on your own country. But for that, you have to go out. It seems absurd, but it's like that. It's clear why. So I think you will probably, when you go out, to acquire new knowledge, or just to see something different. I would even put it that way. I don't know if that's the cutting edge knowledge that you need over there. See something different. See in another logic how people live in a society and how people do business. Then you will find out opportunities here today, and I do think that the Brazilian market, I'm totally in line with what you said now, has a lot of opportunities in terms of entrepreneurship. There's big thing, a lot of things to be done still here. No? So you might find a new perspective, you might find a new idea outside, and then come back and say, hey, I didn't even see that before. With this new perspective, I'm able now to see my country, my market, my social system, whatever you want to call it, differently, and will make it, hopefully, a change here, and for the better. That's what I think. So go out, but come back. But this will be naturally. And well, the mitigating risk, I can only also agree that yes, we are doing that. And maybe I shouldn't say that maybe of somebody who's trying to promote Europe here, but maybe there your connection with the United States can help you maybe even more than with Europe, because talking from a German perspective now, we also have this good, then you know a little bit about what I'm saying now. But you know that in Europe, and for example in Germany, the market also for venture capital is still, compared to the United States, also very low and difficult, because the culture is different. In the United States, it's more natural to try something out, to fail, and to try something new. The valley of death is there. We know about that, and I think it has a lot to do with what we heard in the beginning. It's not only because there is not only these kind of studies and analysis, but also behind what are the reasons for it. And there's a lot, and there's maybe not this one answer, but one part of the answer is that the people fail because they have a great technological idea. They just do not come far enough on the business side. So yes, please form the people in entrepreneurial thinking. This will not solve the whole problem, but a little part of it for sure. And the other part is that we need the intermediaries, like your agency, like the people working on patents, like Fraunhofer does in Europe, to mitigate or to translate exactly between these two worlds that I was mentioning before, the science and the industry, because this is where the valley of death is located, right? Between the research world and the industry world. And the transition between those two is the problem. And there we have to have those specific intermediaries that we heard a lot about tonight, and where Enrich wants to also play its part there on the internationalization level. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll give the word to Jan.
I just have one comment, that in the US, everyone who failed, specifically in Silicon Valley, are hired, because whoever is hiring, the one who has already started his experience and failed, that is a huge value added to a company or to a startup to actually start with somebody who has failed before. So that's on-the-job learning. So I just want to make this remark on top of it, that in the US, I mean, in specific Silicon Valley, the high risk of people who failed.
Well, thank you very much. I heard that there are some more questions in the back. What I would say, we don't have time now to continue here, but we have a cocktail, and you are all invited to join us and to continue the debate and the discussions outside. So thank you very much. Thank you for the participants and the ideas, and I think they're great insights. And thank you, Enrich. And thank you all who are here up to now. And tomorrow, just one thing. Tomorrow we will have another event that is a continuation. So, but we will talk about digital Europe, the trends and challenges that were happening, and it will start earlier at 2:30. Thank you.